Our platform speakers today include Edith Beecham, granddaughter of WES's first leader, George Beecham, Don Montagna, Richard Nugent, Amanda Poppy Lincox, and emceeing the great lot, our own senior leader, Casey Slack.
Thank you, Adam. We're going to take a walk through WES's history today before you hear more from me. So to get us started, I'd like to invite up Edith Beecham, granddaughter of WES's first leader, George Beecham.
I'm Edith Beecham, she, her, and honored to have been asked by Casey Slack, WES's newest and fifth senior leader, to speak today at WES's Founders Day celebration about my grandfather, George Emerson Beecham Sr. I want to add in a few founding mothers, however, in a minute, all of whom had a profound impact on me, but specifically on WES. My grandfather joined the board of the Washington Ethical Society during World War II, when many ethical culturists from other cities, from societies in St. Louis, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York City, all came to Washington to work in the Roosevelt administration. He came from Indiana in 1942. At the end of the war, in 1945, many members returned home, including the president of the board. And my grandfather, the vice president, became the de facto president. There were about 19 adult members left. I think there had been 140 to 150. He completed the requirements to be licensed clergy in short order and volunteered to keep WES going and recruit new members and families from this area. Being clergy in the AEU, American Ethical Union, became his highest calling, and holding the honorary title Dean of Leaders for AEU in the 1980s up until his death in 1988. Back home in Indiana, a decade before the war, he had founded a community college in Kokomo, Indiana in 1931 at the start of the Great Depression, really to create a job for himself and his younger brother. It's now a campus of Indiana University at Kokomo. Grandfather recruited a dean from the University of Chicago as his board president, who would years later hire him in DC at war's end to help staff the American Council on Education, ACE, at DuPont Circle, where that Chicago dean was by then the president of ACE. That connection would have a profound impact on WES also. Those organizational abilities my grandfather demonstrated throughout his life, where he was catalyst to start many other organizations and movements, he helped draw up bylaws to formalize WES. Therefore, he's pictured in WES's lobby on the first panel as the first leader and one of the founders. There's a sheet that I drew up, it's so long, of all the other organizations he was involved in. I set it out on the lobby table. I'm sorry the Zoom people can't read it, but it's extensive. My grandmother, Catherine Weaver Beecham, taught home economics at the same high school in Indiana where grandfather also first taught. She helped him found Kokomo Junior College and was also instrumental in managing some of the early foundational needs of WES. I don't know. I don't know if the Zoom people can see the photo. My grandfather's on the left, my grandmother is next to him, and those are my parents, George E. Beecham Jr. and my mother, Virginia Beecham. She was newly Dr. Virginia Beecham, having graduated from the University of Chicago with a PhD just before my birth. So that's that time period. My grandparents' home was where WES temporarily met in their living room in those early post-war years, until the congregation grew enough to start renting meeting space on Sundays in one of the only desegregated hotels in DC. That was really important to my grandfather. And also, there's another founder on that board, too, that it was important to. By my birth in 1956, I believe WES was meeting in a former bank building just purchased near DuPont Circle, which is probably why it had iron bars on the first floor windows. and which is where I'm assuming my naming ceremony took place. Now, is there anyone else here at WES today or watching from Zoom who has known and heard all 5 of WES's senior leaders besides me? Maybe in the chat we can find out. But perhaps Betty Chiacaro from Virginia is listening. She reminded me a few months ago that she had taught my Sunday school class when Ed Erickson became the 2nd leader. Don Montagna, WES's 3rd senior leader, kindly married me to my first husband, December 19th, 1981, the very same day that Don's first adopted child was arriving from India. Very, very kind of him. Another founding member through the first 3 leaders was Mrs. Olya Margolin, and she's one of the founding mothers I want to talk about. She was a neighbor of my grandparents in Cleveland Park, often came to WES with her husband to hear my grandfather speak, and later Ed and Don, and would later mentor me. I last saw her here in this very room, she was sitting over there in that corner, just before her death in September 1990, and we had some moments to chat. My mother, knowing her from WES, had introduced us when I was 19 in 1975. We had a picnic my first day as her intern that year at the base of the brand new Mary McLeod Bethune statue in Lincoln Park. She told me how she and many others, including Eleanor Roosevelt, had been mentored by the great lady and college founder of the HBCU, Bethune-Cookman University, which Dr. Bethune began as a girls' school in Daytona Beach, Florida in 1904. She moved later to Washington, D.C., and became best friends with the First Lady and helped her at the United Nations. Together, they, Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune, drafted and shepherded to unanimous adoption the UN Declaration on Human Rights in 1948. Now, this was 1 year after my grandfather had officially become the leader. Mary McLeod Bethune was also on the board of the American Council on Education. Are we seeing the connection? She mentored my grandfather also and recruited him to help her with a strategy to implement the Human Rights Resolution in the United States. Olya's husband, Ben Margolin, was asked a few years later by the American Ethical Union to be its lawyer for the famous freedom of religion tax case for WES, which culminated with a win at the D.C. Court of Appeals in 1957. But Olya had come from New York City to represent the National Council of Jewish Women in Washington during the Truman administration, which she did all the way through to the Carter administration. So Ben and Olya were already in D.C. She was great good friends with Dorothy Height, and both had been mentored by Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. Both their women's groups and WES were among the early members to the new group of groups that Dr. Bethune, along with A. Philip Randolph, formed for the new Civil Rights Initiative to implement the Human Rights Resolution, the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, now known as the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, with WES still listed as a member organization. My grandfather also helped with the bylaws for the LCCR and recruited members for that group too. My grandfather often would MC those early meetings on behalf of Dr. Bethune, although Dr. Bethune was really the chair of them. Dr. Bethune died in 1955, 1 year after the Supreme Court win in Brown versus Board of Education, and integrating education was the first initiative of the Leadership Council. That win was 70 years ago this week. Now, from 1948 to 1954, WES worked on a volunteer basis on a number of initiatives with James Farmer and also with Thurgood Marshall through the LCCR. Later in the civil rights movement, both Olya Margolin and Dorothy Height were sent telegrams by the Lyndon Johnson's White House inviting them to the signings of both the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. It took 16 years for the U.S. to enact the provisions of that 1948 UN declaration, but WES had a member in the room where it finally happened. Now, my mother would go on to found the Women's Studies program at the University of Maryland in the 1970s, one of the first in the nation, and worked on the implementation of Title IX. And Amanda Poppy, to bring back my all the leaders that have impacted our family, officiated at my mother's funeral service at the University of Maryland a few years ago, where my mother was eulogized by the Chancellor of the University of Maryland System, Dr. Britt Kerwin, who exclaimed that she mentored me. So you see all the connections that WES helped form and nurture. And for all those reasons, I wanted to mention my founding mothers who mentored and nurtured me as well, in addition to my grandfather. And on this 70th anniversary of the Brown v. Board of Education case and the 80th anniversary of WES for Founders Day, suffice it to say that WES has had extraordinary leaders, and they were many, among its founders and ever since, all collaborating to uplift our society, capital S, and society in general. These connections matter, and that fire of commitment.
Thank you so much, Edith. We'll hear next via video from WES's former
Don
senior
Montagna.
leader, Don Montagna,
In
who was senior
1972,
leader from
when I was elected
1972
leader
until
of-
2006. Wow.
I'm Don Montagna. In 1972, when I was elected the leader of the Washington Ethical Society, I also became the youngest member. The joke was that most congregations hire a father figure. We hired a son. And that can be pretty threatening to a new young leader. I mean, some cultures are hypercritical or indifferent or indulgent. The founders of the Washington Ethical Society, people like Alice and Mac McIntyre and the Beechams, they were fervently committed to creating ethical culture. They did it in the world. They were champions of civil rights at a time in the 40s when it was dangerous to do so. They wanted their ethical society to be an ethical culture. They set the highest expectations for me, and they gave me whatever resources and encouragement I needed to elicit my best. The next generation followed that same idea. People like Joel Silverman. I'm totally supportive and with high expectations. The process was supported by my wife Nancy, who's the daughter of a minister, so she knew the sacrifices. She was the springboard and the source of some of my best ideas. Our own generation, people like Todd and Lynn Wayman, Judy Toth and Mary Harmon and Peggy Gates, we made Elicit the Best our theme. We had classes on how to elicit the best from singles or couples, families or friendships, and in the world. I mean, we championed ending poverty and peace and civil rights and immigration, all still needing considerable amount of work. We had celebrations of the seasons that were lavish, as produced by Mary Harmon. When I think about those years, I wonder, what might I have left behind? And when I do, I picture sitting in that meeting hall and looking up and seeing the words, where people meet to seek the highest is holy ground. I love that message and happy to have left it. You now are the founders of the future. I hope for you that you can elicit the best from your new leader and from each other. Happy 80th anniversary.
Next, we'll have the pleasure of hearing live and in person from Richard Nugent.
Well, it's great to be back here at WES. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Richard Nugent, still is. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister who served as the interim leader at WES from 2006 to 2008, the years bridging the leadership of Don and Amanda Poppy. For the past 16 years, I've worked for the Unitarian Universalist Association as a bureaucrat, as director of the Church Staff Finances Office. My staff of 10 and I lead the HR team for our 1,000 plus congregations, including WES. I appreciate the Reverend KC's inviting me to participate in today's Founders Day platform. We accomplished a lot during those 2 years, 2006 to 2008, and thank you all who were here at the time and led that effort. We supported the leadership certification for Mary Herman. We helped bridge your community revision of your youth program, expanded employee benefits for your staff, helped the WES community to decide on joint affiliation with the AEU and the UUA, and oversaw the expansion of your building by enlarging the kitchen and connecting the office building and the meeting hall. This was an important commitment to WES's future, and it's this last accomplishment that I would like to discuss a bit more fully this morning. This building is more than the sum of its parts. It's a home for those seeking meaning in their lives and work. It's a place of learning where the values of one generation are passed on to the next generation. And I should add, the next generation teaching some values to the older generation. It's a refuge for those who might be struggling with one or more dimensions of their lives. It's a place to support those who are seeking to make our community more just. It's a welcoming place for others in our community to meet, to celebrate, and to reflect. It's a comforting room to those mourning the loss of a loved one, or welcoming a new addition to the family. In short, this building, your building, is sacred ground which elicits the best in ourselves and encourages others to live ethical, meaningful, and fulfilling lives. I am grateful for the opportunity to have played a role in the story of the Washington Ethical Society. In the intervening years, you have done so much. I keep following. I know you will continue to be a beacon for those seeking a liberal religious home in this sacred place. So may it be.
We'll hear next via video from Amanda Poppy, who was WES's senior leader from 2008 until 2020.
Hi, WES. I'm Amanda Poppy. My pronouns are she, her, and I served as senior leader from 2008 to 2020. I am thinking of a story that is feeling especially relevant right now, which is how the community came together after the presidential election of 2016. We got together that first Sunday and held each other in care and love and music, and knew that we were a space that people who had never been through the doors before and were maybe never going to come through the doors again, that they knew that WES was there at the right moment for them at a time when they needed to be with other people. And building on that experience in November, the congregation came together to create an event with potluck food, of course, and cards of appreciation to organizations that supported immigrants, and an opportunity for people to be together and to build solidarity and community together, and to build resistance and joy together. That happened in January. And I just appreciated the spirit of creativity and possibility and fierce resilience that was so embodied by WES in that moment, and that I think is actually really core to the identity of who WES is. and who you will continue to be. So I am sending so many good wishes. I'm thinking about our shared history, the long history that you had before I ever showed up, that I got to celebrate while I was there, and your present and the future that you have for so long to come. So I hope all of those will continue to embody fierce resilience and joy.
Our last video message today will be from WES's most recent interim minister, Lynn Cox.
Hello, Wes. I'm the Reverend Lynn Cox. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I served as your interim senior leader from 2020 to 2022. Happy Founders Day. I'm in awe of everything that Wes has done throughout your history, and I will be watching from afar with love as you continue to live into your humanist values in the future. While we were together, some of the things that you did to live into your values were all about mutual care during the height of the pandemic. The way you were cautious about public health, the way you really thought about the needs of the most vulnerable, the way you thought about how to connect, and the way you learned a whole lot of things really quickly to become a hybrid community as meeting in person became a little bit more and a little bit more possible. So you learned new technical skills, you learned new ways of social distancing, you learned new ways of connecting with things like Thai groups. You learn new ways of collaborating with other congregations, as you did for the OWL class. And it was hard, and you did it. You can look back on that and say that you truly lived into your values during one of the most difficult defining moments of this generation. So bask in that and think about how you're going to take that creative energy into your future. It's going to be great, and I wish you all the best. Happy Founders Day.
Hi, I'm Casey Slack. I have been WES's senior leader since 2022. It has in fact been a little over 2 years since I spent a week doing trial by potluck, getting to know many of your committees, many of you for the first time, and boy, it has been a journey. I'm not going to pretend that the last 2 years have been easy. I don't get up here to lie to you. We have had struggles, we have had difficult transitions coming out of the depth of the pandemic and figuring out what it's like to be in person together again. Who you all are now, who we are together in a new relationship. That's a lot of work. And you have showed up for it. You have showed up here on Sunday morning and Wednesday evening and the errant Saturday afternoon. You have worked in the garden and worked in the hall, and you have worked out in the world together to make things possible. It's a hell of a legacy that I have inherited here. Those are some acts to follow. And as we all know, I put on a good show. But what I want to talk about today is the future. We've heard a lot about where WES has been, what WES has done, and so much of it is so impressive. It is a little intimidating to think about living up to George Beacham, living up to Don Montana, living up to Richard and Amanda and Lynn and Ed Erickson and Mary Herman and all of these people who have held such space in your lives and in your community. If you've been around, you've noticed that I've spent most of the last 2 years asking questions. How does this work? What is this committee? Why do we do this way? Do we have to keep doing it that way? Getting to know you and getting a sense of who you are and who you wish to be. I spent the last 2 years thinking and wondering and trying to drive while I still don't know how to read the map. You know also, if you've been in conversation with me, that my preference is that we make decisions all together. I like to be just right in front of where you're at so that I can guide as best as I can through what's sticky, and also so you can tell me what's sticky, because if I'm way out there and something's sticky over there, I don't know. How can I know? But today I want to change pace a little bit. I want to tell you where I would like us to go. I've been reticent to do this for a number of reasons, but it feels like it is time. So here is what our history inspires me to dream about. I dream about WES as a community where there is something that you could come to do any day of the week. Whether that is just a space where you come and work on your laptop, or you come to have coffee with your friends. Whether that is shared meals or board games or writing letters to encourage people to vote. Where you bring the other organizations that you're part of. You say, we have to have a meeting, I know where to have that meeting. But that's obviously not all. I dream about a WES that people know about. That when I go to the gay bar on a Tuesday night, I can say I work at the Washington Ethical Society, and anybody knows what I'm talking about. When you go to play cards with your friends who aren't from WES, or you're in the grocery store wearing your WES shirt or carrying your bag, and people know. People know what that place is, and what do they know about WES? They know that that is a place that you can go if you want to learn and grow. That is a place you can go if you want to get involved in a community that is multi-generational for real. I want this to be a place where when people have children, they say, you know what? I know where we're going to go. And they know right away. Because we have programming, and we have volunteers for that programming every Sunday. I want this to be a place where our young people, I'm going to gesture at you, sorry, where our young people know that they get to be leaders. Where every time we are planning, we are talking to our teenagers and our children, and we are checking in with what the youth see as the future. And I want this to be a place that cares for our elders, where we are reaching out to folks who are at home, our friends who live in Riderwood or who are in rehab facilities, where we are connecting, where we are committed to caring for each other like that. And I want this to be a place where we focus on some of the hardest things in society and do what we can to make them better. I want us to work on poverty and homelessness. This city that we meet in, that we live in, that we work and play in is ravaged by economic inequality. There are people living in parks. There is someone near my house who lives on a bit of sidewalk. That's wrong. And we all know that that is wrong. I don't know the exact steps we take, but that's the direction we need to go. We need to stand up for our environment. Our climate is in a situation of catastrophe. And we owe it to everyone who will come next, but also to ourselves and our inherent connectedness to all that is, to work to make it better whether that work is adding to our own keystone plant and native plant gardens, turning our front yard into flower beds and vegetable gardens, making sure that our own systems are working as well as possible, as ecologically in tune as possible, or it's showing up down the street and saying, hey, it's time to go. We need action right now. I want this to be a place that is inspiring, a place where you can come and you could be whoever you are, not behave however you want to. Be whoever you are, so that it does not matter when you come here what you look like or how much money you have, where in the area you live. PG County, stand up. What you look like, where you were born, how you speak, how educated you are. A space where you can come and know that you will be respected and valued, that your voice will matter. When I listen to my elders, those of you in the room, those of you who shared videos, those of you who are my parents, they're up here. When I listen, I hear that the world needs care. The thing I am called to do by each of my people, those I chose and those I was given by birth, is to love the hell out of this world. We don't believe in hell, so that seems a little bit easy. But it is my firm conviction that the only hell or heaven we will get is what we build here. And we don't got to think about it in those terms, but I'm going to use them right now. All of the good that is possible is us. All of the bad that is possible is also us. It is our choices, the way we decide to live from day to day, the way we decide to reconnect after conflict, the way we decide to present ourselves as we meet people in the world. It changes everything. It changes everything. We are the inheritors of a great legacy and the ancestors of something we can't even imagine yet. I am so excited to be on this journey with you. I am so glad to be in relationship with all of you. I am so busy being in relationship with all of you. Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for everything that you have done that led us to this day. And thank you in advance for everything you're going to do in our years together. This place is a gift. This message is world-changing. This way of living, our choice to elicit the best in ourselves and each other, it'll preach. And it does. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. For our history, for our future, for where we are right now. Thank you. Give yourself a big round of applause.